And if I were to bring it to my own field of experience, oh my gosh, that's great. What is up, guys? My name is Jerome, and welcome to Fishcracker Faith, where faith is bite sized. Have you ever had a leap of faith? Probably not, but we're all familiar with the idea. It's doing something, expecting a certain outcome, without certainty that the expected outcome would take place. It's like a baby jumping from a height to the arms of their dad, or a person jumping from one platform to another without seeing the other side. I honestly couldn't think of any more examples that didn't involve jumping. When it comes to God, religion, or faith, this leap is often leveled against us as a sort of crutch by more of our scientifically minded brethren. Now, while definitely not all, there is certainly a contingent of these people who believe that faith and belief are nonsense in the face of scientific evidence. So they accuse us Christians of being unthinking, uncritical, or, in conclusion, untrustworthy. They're called empiricists or positivists, or more popularly, atheists. But regardless of what you call them, these people hold on to the belief that unless something can be scientifically verified, it cannot be true. But how did they get to that conclusion? Did they, as they assert truth to be, scientifically verify that their belief is true? Or have they also, without meaning to, taken a leap of faith? So this isn't a debate about the existence of God, but to understand the nature of a leap of faith. Because contrary to popular belief, a leap of faith isn't blind, it's calculated. You know, what comes to mind when I think about a leap of faith is a story of my nephew when he was just a little kid. You know, he's a tween now, and I feel my knees buckle when I think about how much time flew by. But when he was just a toddler, around 1 or 2 years old, his dad used to make him stand on the table or a counter. Well, he took a step away. Then, with his arms slightly outstretched, just like this, he'd tell his son to jump. Immediately, my nephew's stubby little legs bent down, and like a spring, he pushed his little body into the air and jumped toward his dad, who naturally caught him in his arms. They do this a few times, usually at the end of dinner. And then sometimes my nephew would tell his dad to, like, go farther. And his dad would take a few steps farther, but he would catch him every single time. The best part was when he giggled hysterically. I mean, whose heart wouldn't melt when a baby starts laughing out loud? But, it wasn't always like that. The first time I saw it, my nephew wouldn't even let go of his dad. It took some time, some convincing, and a lot of false starts. And each time his dad was like, I'm here, I got you, I will catch you, and all other sorts of encouraging words. Eventually, my nephew did take that leap of faith. And then he did it again in less time. And again in even less time. And in each successive leap, my nephew became more confident, more bold, and dare I say, more believing. My little nephew's leap of faith demonstrates exactly what leaps of faith are. First and foremost, a leap of faith presupposes uncertainty. And with that uncertainty comes doubt, hesitation, and get this, study. When you can't be certain of the outcome, you doubt if that outcome would actually happen. You hesitate with your actions because you're not sure if the outcome would take place in the first place. Those two are pretty straightforward. But what's often forgotten, neglected even, is that leaps of faith lead a person to study a situation. My nephew checks the distance between him and his dad. He looks down on the table to see if he can jump from it. He begs his dad to come closer. It might not look like it, but these are acts of observation. Observation that leads to inferences, and inferences that lead to conclusions. And more than this, my nephew hears the words of encouragement from his dad. These words trigger emotions in his little mind, maybe even memories. When he hears his dad, he might recall times when his dad was present when he was scared. I wouldn't really know, but this too is study. And if I were to bring it to our own field of experience, say if I was blindfolded and someone asked me to jump to bridge a gap, I would most likely use the same tools. I would study my experiences and sensations, and I would go back to the memories I have with the person asking me to jump. Do I find him trustworthy? Do I have memories in the past that
point to his trustworthiness?
All of these systems work in tandem to calculate the probability of a decision working in your favor. If, after weighing all the information, you find that it will largely work in your favor, then you take that leap of faith. It's not certainty that leads one to leap, but probability. Now, I'm not saying that it's all probability. I mean, if it were, then it wouldn't be misunderstood as blind. But leaps of faith factor in their probabilistic calculation, an element often left out in scientific testing: trust. Specifically, the trustworthiness of the thing inviting the leap of faith. And here's where it gets muddy. Because leaps of faith, despite everything I've just said, depend entirely upon trust. And that's often why we're called crazy for doing so. When describing something as leaps of faith, people often have in mind a person risking it all despite the overwhelming evidence against him. But because that person trusts, either in their work, their calculations, or in the person inviting them to leap, that person becomes capable of taking that leap.
Going back to the story with my nephew, the next time he was asked to jump, he took a lot less time than the first one. It wasn't because he could jump farther or that he was closer to the ground, but because he knew he could trust that his dad would catch him in the air. And what was growing wasn't just that his dad would catch him, but that his dad would do what he said he'd do.
And that's exactly the degree of trust driving people to take a leap in faith. People don't leap because they're told. People leap because they trust in what is making them leap. And that trust has been built by past experiences, memories, and most of all, unbroken promises. We often call this trust by another word: faith. It's even in the name, leap of faith, because it's faith that makes a person leap, and faith that defines what type of leap it is. When people talk about faith, they have this idea of a person who has lost their ability to think for themselves, relying solely on the person they have faith in. They think that faith is blind because they do not see, or worse, they refuse to see.
But faith doesn't mean shutting down our ability to think critically. It's not blind per se. On the contrary, faith can't help but see. Faith sees the reality that not everything is in their favor. But faith also sees the one who guarantees the victory in spite of the uncertainty and the contrary. Faith sees what other people don't, that there is something or someone who is working in their favor.
I've been quite ambiguous regarding the source of one's faith. That's deliberate. Because you don't need to have faith in God to have faith at all. Faith is an act performed in trust towards something. And we all trust something, whether it's ourselves, science, and God. Nothing is ever certain. Even science has a degree of uncertainty. Everything, at a certain point, boils down to trust. Can I trust my theory? Can I trust my instincts? Can I trust the person telling me to trust him? If we only make decisions based on full certainty, then we would never get anything done, much less accomplished. And if that's the case, then what or who should we trust? Who should we place our faith in? Who do we trust to make a leap of faith? Ultimately, only in God. Because only God, as being itself, will not disappoint, will not deceive, and will not deny those who trust in Him. But that's for another episode.
So, how about we end by talking about the two philosophical concepts usually associated with the leap of faith? The first one is called Pascal's wager. Pascal posits it like this: when you've weighed the evidence, found belief or unbelief to be equal in its truthfulness, but still find yourself unable to decide between the two, well, why not err on the side of belief? It's a calculated response to belief. A well-educated bet, if you will.
If you wager on belief and at the end of your life discover it to be true, then you have heaven waiting to receive you as a reward. If, however, you discover it to be false, you'd still have lived a loving, fulfilling, and virtuous life. On the other hand, If you wager on unbelief and prove yourself true, there is no you to celebrate, and no life to consider fulfilling and virtuous. And if you discover in the end that you've bet on the wrong horse, then eternal damnation awaits you. Pascal believes that wagering on belief works better for you than otherwise. But it's not a blind or fearful response, but a logical calculation. He doesn't want us to wager on either if we found one or the other less convincing. Rather, the odds for either have to be convincing for us first. That's why he tells us to weigh the evidence before placing our bets. And that's not blind.
Which leads seamlessly into the second concept, Soren Kierkegaard's leap of faith. Kierkegaard doesn't really call it leap of faith, but people usually attribute that to him because of his musings about the nature of faith and reason. Kierkegaard's qualitative leap, as he called it, is an act done from the edges of reason. Culture claims the limitlessness of reason, but Kierkegaard doesn't think so. Rather, reason has no answer to the restlessness of man's spirit, which is something in the realm of faith. Between reason and faith is an unbridgeable chasm, owing to reason's insistence on certainty and faith's characteristic lack of it. Unbridgeable, that is, only from one side. Because while reason scoffs at faith, faith embraces reason. Only in one do you need to abandon the other.
Kierkegaard recognizes the uncertainty of faith, but it's only through that faith that man's spirit finds rest. So he makes the leap, and God invites us to do the same. Calculate all you want. No amount of calculation can ever bridge that uncertainty. You'll just need to trust in God. All the evidence points to Him having the highest probability and the greatest trustworthiness. So, how about it? Are you ready to leap? Knowing what a leap of faith really takes.